I'd like to turn the place over to Andrew.
Good afternoon. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see plenty of old faces, a few new ones. Thanks, everyone, for coming out to Lowell this afternoon, and hopefully this will be a fun adventure around the mountains like the B&M used to do many, many decades ago. So, quick question before we get going. Can everybody hear me if I sit here as opposed to standing up front? Okay, so this is okay with everyone? Everyone can hear me okay? Okay, so we'll get going right away. This is a sort of a map of the general area that we'll be traveling through today. Way down in the bottom center, you can see Tilton, where we'll start our journey. We're going to head up the old White Mountains division, Laconia, Plymouth, Woodsville, cut up to Whitefield, all the way up to Berlin. Then we'll make our way back down through Crawford Notch, courtesy of the Maine Central. We can't do the entire trip on B&M rails, but we'll have the Maine Central pinch hit for us. Then we'll head on down to Ossipee to end up. So without further ado, let's get in the car at North Station. We'll go up through Somerville, Medford, Billerica, Nashua, Manchester, Concord. And now we're in Tilton, or Northfield, technically. This is a shot of mine from April of 2008. This is the New England Southern Power for a caboose train that would be pulled up to Lockmere. Then from Lockmere, it was pulled all the way back down to Concord. I believe it was called the Capital Express or something along those lines. This was an area that I spent many years going through as a kid. I never saw a train on these rails, so when I found out from an online messenger group they would be running a train up through there, I drove up for the day to photograph it. It was just kind of cool to see a train on the rails that I had never witnessed in my younger days, and especially with the old semaphore right next to it as well.
Did Brian Dame help restore those the semaphore signal?
No, that semaphore was relocated from elsewhere on the line and set up by John Clements and his people at the Merrimack Valley Railroad. So there hadn't been a semaphore there, but nice to see that there's one still.
And I just realized before we continue on as well, I do want to give credit for a few folks out there who helped me with some historic images for this presentation. Huge thank you to Dane Malcolm, who very kindly lent me a few of his images to be displayed. We're well aware of Dane's work. They are absolutely fantastic photos that I'm very happy to showcase here. Dave Poore also allowed me to use a few of his images of North Country operations in the Whitefield, Berlin area. And finally, a huge thank you to Rick Kafori, who also assisted me with providing me with some historic photos from our archives to kind of give this presentation a bit of a then and now sort of flair. So without further ado, we'll head up the line. One other thing I'll just point out real quickly as well, we're going to go in the clockwise direction as these trips used to proceed, but the directions of the trains and the photos won't always be heading in that same direction, if you know what I mean. So we're heading north, but this train is heading south. So now that I've confused the heck out of everyone, we'll keep rolling. This is the Route 3 crossing and the Winnipesaukee River crossing just north of downtown Tilton. Flagman's hard at work in the spring of 2008, guiding the caboose train across busy Route 3. You can see pretty new crossbucks there, but the stanchion the crossbucks are on definitely looks like it dates back to the Boston and Maine days. That was kind of cool to see some of those historic artifacts. Then we come to our first historic shot. This is Lockmere Station, also known as East Tilton. I'm not aware of who the photographer is on this image, but it likely dates back to around the turn of the century, I'd guess, just from the sort of the feeling of the shot. And yeah, it's just interesting to see what this location used to look like in its heyday. Then we come back to modern day. This was October 31st, 2020, the passenger special that ran down to Lockmere. It's stopping at the, I believe it's called Silver Lake Road crossing right there, which is also the end of the New England Southern Territory, as you can see from the sign there on the left side of the image. So that was a really fun chase, beautiful day, and quite a few images in the first part of this presentation are from that chase. So we'll get used to seeing that blue switcher engine on front there. Next stop up on the line is Winnisquam. I don't have a ton of good photos of this actual station just due to I've just never really sort of been there at the right time, and since I was heading south on this chase, I kind of had to pull over to this side of the road, and you know, the train almost beat me to the crossing, so I didn't have a ton of time to stage the shot. But still pretty cool though. Beautiful, beautiful old station, now repurposed as a house. Unfortunately, I'm not quite sure what that piece of heavy equipment is. If my 4-year-old were here right now, he could tell all of us. But it looks like some sort of a mower, maybe. But yeah, so this is Winnisquam. We come to another historic shot. This is Laconia in 1953, February 17th, 1953 to be exact. As you can see, I mean, it doesn't look too much different from today, aside from the canopy having been closed in over the years. And you know, it's definitely a pretty busy place back in the day, and just a magnificent station in the Lakes region. Definitely one of the sort of the showcase pieces. We have a photo from late year passenger operations at Laconia. This is from the Brent Michaels collection. Don't know the exact year, but given the RDCs, I'd guess probably early to mid 60s. I think service to Laconia ceased in 65, so probably like 62, 63. Beautiful 58 Chevy parked there on the right too. I've always sort of liked that. Oh, that's a Studebaker next to it as well. Wow, yeah, beautiful old Detroit iron. Then we come to a modern day shot of Laconia. This was taken last summer by myself. Yeah, as you can see, you know, the canopy's been closed in over the years, but the basic architecture of the building still remains, and it really is a magnificent structure. One of my favorite B&M stations of all time. Then this was that special charter train at Laconia. As most of you know, seeing trains at Laconia is definitely not a common sight these days, so you know, it was really great to be able to photograph one parked at the station with the order boards up and everything. Really served as a nice prop. We continue up the line to Lakeport. This was the caboose train from 2008 that I chased heading south. You can see the curbing from the old passenger station to the right there. Freight house is just out of sight on the left. And one thing that always amazed me too, a little hard to tell in this photo, but those boats are parked incredibly close to the right-of-way. So the train always kind of has to finagle its way through fairly slowly.
Who sponsored this train, Andrew?
You know, Mal, the sponsor, I guess, I mean, anyone out there, correct me if I'm wrong, but whoever was maybe in charge of the caboose village in Northfield at the time, that's where all the cabooses were parked, I believe. So I'm not quite sure who the exact sponsor was, but I know they were discontinued, I think around like 2011 or something, due to insurance reasons, but they were very interesting things to chase before that happened. As we'll see later on, I chased one up the Pemi, and there was always definitely something you don't see every day, so I'm glad I was able to photograph a lot of them. Then a more recent Lakeport photo from October 31st, 2020. Again, freight house in the background, the old platform curbing in the foreground there. Yeah, really stunning sunny New England day right there. Okay, we come to another historic shot at Weirs Beach. This is Jim Shaughnessy. Sunday, August 27th, 1961. Busy day at Weirs Beach. Plenty of old cars, the Butt RDC. Not sure which direction it's traveling in, but and of course, you know, the famous Mount Washington there in the background, cruising around the lake. So, really cool shot of Weirs Beach back in the day with three modes of transportation present, which is also pretty cool. Then a more modern shot of Weirs Beach. I believe this was 2012. Winnipesaukee Scenic Excursion Train heading south. Then an even more recent shot at Weirs Beach, another southbound excursion train heading to Lakeport on its regular run. Yep, just a beautiful, beautiful day on Lake Winnipesaukee. Always loved how the tracks run right adjacent to the water for such a length in this segment.
Is that the train from Meredith?
Yes, it is. That train came down from Meredith down to Lakeport. Then a northbound shot at Weirs Beach. Believe this is also 2012, heading north to Meredith on its regular route. Then again, that excursion train from October 31st, 2020, heading south through Weirs Beach. You can see the Ossipee mountain range sort of off to the side in the background there in the lake. It's pretty quiet at Weirs Beach that day, though, being Halloween doesn't tend to attract a lot of beachgoers. Then this is the view of Weirs Beach from riding the train. This was a ride my son and I took on the Winnipesaukee Scenic about 2 years back, and just a really nice, summer image of New Hampshire's lakes region. Everyone's just enjoying the beautiful day, and it was really cool to see it from the train. It's hasn't probably changed too much since last 50, 75, 100 years even. So kind of a timeless image right there. So heading up towards Meredith, we parallel Neal Shore Drive for a little bit. The lake would sort of be just out of sight on the right there. And there are some cottages between the road and the lake. And the train parallels the road pretty closely, as we see. Sort of interrupts people's summer for a few minutes as it goes through. Then the Concord 36 mile post is also along this road as well. So yeah, it's always nice to see the mile posts out in their element, and yeah, I'm a huge fan of capturing as many of them as I can. So now we come up to a historic shot of Meredith, New Hampshire. Again, I don't know the photographer on this one, but the image probably, again, dates to about the turn of the century, I'd guess. The station no longer stands. I believe it was moved up to Route 3 for a while. It was used as a restaurant. Then I'm not sure what year it happened, but I believe it suffered a fire. And at that point, I think the building was demolished at that time. But really a shame, really, really nice, impressive building. And I vaguely remember as a kid up in that area seeing it when we drove down Route 3. And just always thinking like, gee, that really looks like a train station. And, my intuition was correct. But yeah, it's a shame that it's no longer with us, quote unquote.
You had a nice view from the Route 3 overpass over onto that. I remember that.
Yeah.
The highway's so high, Route 3's so high, you can get a nice view.
Yeah, that's a pretty high bridge over the tracks there. Even as a kid, I always remember looking out over that when we drove over, always wondering, oh, well, I see a train coming through. Or
You weren't the only one.
So this was August of 2012. You can actually see the old platform curbing on the right for the Meredith station. And if you look really closely, you can even still see the yellow safety line sort of in the middle of the asphalt part of the platform there. Kind of cool. That's a relic I've been able to find at a few locations, which has always sort of been a pleasant surprise. Then this wasn't an active train at the time. It was just a Winnipesaukee Scenic train that was parked at the station location. But yeah, just neat to see that even though the building itself is long gone, some relics of the depot do remain, and it actually is still an active railroad, which is pretty cool. All right, so now we're heading north out of Meredith. We parallel the shore of Lake Wokawan for a short distance. This is a shot from this is an R. Lewis photo from 1951. It's a little cut off on the left side, but there's a public beach right there. You can see a bunch of beachgoers there enjoying a really fine summer day, and it's just a really quintessential summer day in New England image. And well, I'm sure many of them were annoyed to have the train blasting through and kind of creating a noisy scene for them personally. Like Yeah, it probably is the Alouette heading up to Woodsville. I mean, yeah, so
That's gotta be a pretty early shot, about 1949 or 1950, because they still have the couplet cover on. Those didn't last very long.
oh wow.
There's no couplet visible.
Right. Oh wow. Oh my God. I just noticed that.
They were on for streamlining purposes. They didn't last very long.
Do you know, Carl, would those still have been on in 1951, or I guess probably?
It could have been CP being CP, but they were delivered in '49, the E8. So, but I'll bet you that's the 49 and 50, maybe 51. But I can't imagine that those couplet covers stayed on very long.
There were only 3 E8s, correct?
I were only 3. Yep.
Yep. I read someplace that the Canadian Pacific bought those 3 just for this service.
They did.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a very fine summer image here. I mean, who doesn't love a beautiful summer day at the beach? But this is New England, as we all know, so let's move on to our next photo. Okay, so this is our first Dane Malcolm shot of the presentation. Dane took this in 1976. As you can see, a little colder than the previous image. We have a snowplow here, same location as the Alouette was just at. Looks like it's had a lot of work on its hands and heading up north from Meredith, clearing the line, or what's left of the snow to clear. So again, really nice image from Dane Malcolm showing what winter was like on the railroad, even days after the snowstorm ended.
In that previous image, I wouldn't think the people on the beach were irritated. We tend to see things in terms of how we see them today.
That's a good point. Yeah, maybe. I guess if they had multiple trains coming through a day, I guess it was just part of the experience. So.
Right. My point was going to be that it was more common to see and hear trains than perhaps we think of today, from today's vantage point.
True.
The road's empty.
Yeah, actually, very few cars visible on the road. Yeah. Okay, so this is 1976, and then finally, let's go to October of 2023. This is the foliage special from Meredith to Plymouth that runs on the fairly rarely used segment of track between Meredith and Plymouth. This was crossing at Lake Wokawan, the same location. You'll notice where the semaphore was in the image of the Alouette. Pretty heavy tree cover has grown in over the years. At some point, I got to see if the base of the semaphore still exists there. I'm guessing
It does not.
Okay, it does not. Okay. You saved me a trip, so I appreciate that. Saved me a trip and maybe a case of poison ivy, so, you know, yeah, so, but it's good to see that even if it's infrequently, there still is some form of train service on this line.
And there is still a beach, correct?
Yes, the beach is still there. Yep, there was no one on it the day that I was there, but it is in fact.
It's out in the water.
Yeah, the little floats are still in the water, so it hasn't. We're not totally into winter just yet. So now we head north out of Meredith. Our next station stop will be in Winona, the famous one-lane underpass there, which I'm sure has been the scene of many scrape, many a fender bender over the years. It's quite an underpass to drive through. And it's pretty cool when the train goes over up ahead. You hear it chugging as it's climbing the hill, and then it appears and crosses right over. So it's a location for many, many years I always wanted to photograph a train at, and you only have a few limited times each year to do so. So this is one of my favorite shots.
I wrote that a number of years ago. It's incredible, the number of low joints, constantly rocking the whole way.
Yeah. All right, so we come to our next historic. Yeah, we come to our next historic image. This is photos from the 1950s. The photographer's unknown, but as we see here, this is the sacred cow, the quote-unquote sacred cow, which I believe ran between Concord and Woodsville, sort of in local service. Somebody out there, correct me if I'm wrong on that, but this is Ashland has always lent itself very well to photos over the years. It's always kind of it's a small town depot, but I feel like there's always a good amount of activity there in the pictures I've seen of it. So this is kind of a nice like early 50s image of life on the railroad. You see a few people, I'm sure the station agent, maybe a few freight agents there on the platform waiting for the train, and just a slice of life from a long time ago. Then I've realized you're starting to get old when one of your own photos you can use as a historic photo in a presentation. This is my photo from February 28th of 2000. A buddy of mine and I went up to just photograph some stations, and we stopped at Ashland, and lines totally snowed in, used for snowmobilers at the time. And I just got out though, because at the time I hadn't really taken many images, so I wanted to document Ashland, and even back then it looked really nice. And then finally, let's go back to October of 2023. That same excursion train that I photographed of Winona is now passing through Ashland, lights on, and in some ways, it kind of reminds me of that 1951 shot of the sacred cow. Not too different, although unfortunately nobody's waiting on the platform to get on the train, but still nice to have these historic props present.
On the right?
Oh, the caboose on the right?
That's a caboose?
Yeah, that's somebody out there might know a little more about that caboose than I will, but I know it was in Plymouth for a little while. Then they moved it down to Ashland a few years back. That's sort of the extent that I know about it, but somebody else out there might have a little more information.
James?
Canadian Pacific.
Brian Dane might be able to tell us about that.
It was built by Canadian Pacific, but it was owned by Ontario Hydro. It was used in unit coal train service. It was one of 4 that came to New England. The sister to it, one number off, higher low, I forget, is the MBTA C1. This caboose I own, and the first year I owned it is when the P&L did the C1's overhaul. And during that time, my van was in Boston on the work train while theirs was up in Lincoln. And there's another one of these Ontario Hydro vans up in Lincoln, been repainted in a different scheme, but just a private van, a private caboose.
Extended vision.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and really makes a nice prop, especially at Ashland too. So I'm glad it seems to have found a home there. It always looks really nice every time I see it. So then we're going to move up to the line. I didn't know this when I was younger, but a small part of the White Mountains did touch the corner of Bridgewater, New Hampshire. As a boy going up to Newfound Lake, Bridgewater was right across the lake, and as always as a kid, I never thought the railroad really touched towns that were close to Newfound Lake, but this proved me wrong, and this was the not much more than a simple flag stop ever existed there to my knowledge, but yeah, this is photographer's unknown, but probably again from about the turn of the century, I'd guess.
And it's no longer there.
Yeah, it's long gone. Not sure what became of it. But then this was a shot of the excursion train from October 2023. Used my telephoto lens on this one, so it's just crossed the bridge over the Pemi. You can kind of see the dual iron truss stanchions of the bridge in the background, and it's approaching the Bridgewater station site. I always kind of liked the effect of this photo, and Halloween was only a few days away, so it kind of seemed appropriate in that regard. Then this is going past the Bridgewater station site. I believe the station was probably roughly where those like concrete blocks were, or maybe it was on the Route 3 side. I'm not certain, but just a place I stopped and grabbed another quick photo of it. So we come to our next Dane Malcolm shot, and I love this image for a multitude of reasons. First and foremost, that's engine 1127 on the front of this local freight here. And as many of us know, this was the engine that was recently saved due to the extensive crowdfunding campaign. So really cool that this engine is still with us and will not be sent to the scrapper. And this I've always enjoyed this segment of Route 3. You have the Pemi right in the background there, the highway immediately adjacent to the railroad. And always a cool place to get photos, old and new. So I've seen several shots taken along here, and I've always kind of wanted to get my own shots. So back in October of 2023, I had that opportunity, as you can see here. Feels kind of similar to the old shot. Dane was clearly standing on higher ground than I was when I took this, but I've always just loved how the tracks run so close to the road, a few places to pull over. You can get a decent broad shot of the train heading north, and yeah, just...
Could you back up one, please?
Sure.
I don't want to sound odd here, but I find the highway marking to be entertaining.
I noticed that as well, the white line inside the yellow.
Been a long time. I do remember seeing that.
Long
Yeah,
time ago.
they closed it.
That's the way it was done.
My guess would be that means you can pass if it's safe to do so, given you still have the double yellow, but then you also have like the highway style.
There was no passing. If it was okay
Oh.
to pass on one side, the yellow on your side would go away.
Oh, wow, interesting.
Both yellow would go away.
Yeah, because I've never seen a marking like that in my lifetime.
You're old enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at it now.
Those are markings for the spaceships that are landing here.
Any idea who'd be taking tank cars up there? There were tank cars on it.
Yeah, that's another good question too. Maybe somebody else, was there a fuel customer in Plymouth maybe, or?
There was, and there was also oil being brought up to the mill in Lincoln.
Oh, okay, yeah, so that very likely, yep.
And those could also, in the mill in Lincoln, there could be chemicals coming up for the paper process.
Okay, so we've arrived in Plymouth now. First leg of our journey, Tilton to Plymouth, is complete. So this is a shot from the early 60s. Photographer's unknown, but again, just another shot of sort of local freight operations in the Plymouth area, which, you know, up until the 1960s with the activity up in Lincoln were pretty substantial. So I just thought this sort of illustrated well the traffic and activity that used to occur in Plymouth. Neat old Volkswagen Bug in the background there as well, too.
White wall tires on the
Yeah.
pregnant roller skate.
Full width height walls.
Then this is from fall of 2023 in roughly the same location, depots slightly to the north. That boxcar that's parked there has been there for many years. I believe the company behind it uses it as storage. It's privately owned to the best of my knowledge. And this was the special foliage train doing the runaround in Plymouth before it heads back up to the Common Man to pick up the passengers who are having a tasty buffet lunch. Another shot of the Plymouth station, beautiful structure, and as many of us know, you know, a wonderful location for two of our meetings every year. Always a real treat to go inside there and just observe how nicely it's been cared for over the years.
That's where we'll be in May.
Yep.
So I guess this was very topical then, Mal. Okay, so we're heading north now. Before we head up to the left towards Rumney and Woodsville, we're going to do a little detour up the Pemi Valley for a few minutes. But this is another unknown photographer, but a shot that I came across a few years ago. And this is a shot of just north of the Junction. Woodsville would obviously be on the left. On the right is the White Mountains branch, which still exists today. You can see the Route 3 bridge and the railroad bridge to the right. Then the section to the left, as many of you who know me pretty well in the society, the Plymouth to Woodsville section has always sort of been an obsession of mine because for a line that was abandoned not too long ago, I say that hesitantly, there seems to be some areas that very little remains of it, and this switch area in particular. When they built exit 26 to I-93, so much of this scene was just completely erased, which always kind of blows my mind to the extent that they reworked this whole area, especially given how rural it is. You know, but as we'll see in a few minutes, there are some things you can still see, but you really have to look hard in this area because so much of it you would just never recognize today if you just drove through.
Andrew, could you back up, please?
Sure.
Is that meant to be a train order board?
Yep.
Supposedly, yeah.
It's not the authentic, it's not the original, but it is B&M hardware, and the B&M never would have had it in a 45-degree position.
Thank you. That was, yes. Right, never saw that.
Okay, oh, and this is April of 2012. Just to give you a little context, then and now, I think I was pretty close to the exact location, but yeah, again, I mean, if you go off to the left, you pretty much run right into Route 3, and there's a community garden on the other side of the highway. I'll show you in a minute what I was able to find there, but again, really a lot of evidence erased of this location. And another thing I found interesting too is over my years of research, to the best of my knowledge, this junction never had a name. I don't think, like, it was, you'd think it would be called maybe like Rumney Junction, Woodsville Junction, but to the best of my knowledge, this junction point did not ever have a name that I was able to ascertain, which seemed interesting. So heading up north on the Pemi, the next stop up is the Blair Bridge. The train tracks are right across the Blair covered bridge there, and the bridge itself has always really interested me too, so I threw this shot in as well. So apparently if you go across the bridge at a pace faster than a walk, it is a $5 fine. That sign says up there. So I've yet to see New Hampshire State Police enforcing that though, but you know, maybe I've just been there at the wrong times. Then this is the caboose train. I believe it was heading, I think this train was actually heading south through Blair. A little piece of the platform curbing you can still see there on the right, I believe. And yeah, it was kind of a cool location to get some action at, just a place that trains don't generally run through very frequently, so it's always a treat to see something. Then we head up to Campton, one town north. We're starting to head up into the mountains. This was a caboose train from 2008, again, heading south. I believe the Campton Depot site, I believe, was on the left there where that grassy area is. Obviously, nothing really remains there today. Then heading north, the line pretty closely parallels Route 3. You can see a little piece of my 91 Honda there in the picture. That was my train chasing vehicle at the time. So we're heading up north through Thornton, heading up to Lincoln. Then I believe this was the former Thornton Depot site. There's a little, kind of hard to see, there's a little bit of asphalt there on the right. Then in the background, I believe those are the Tri-Pyramids, those mountains. In addition to loving the railroad heritage of this area, I've also always loved the mountains. I'm into hiking, so a little of that will be filtered into the presentation as well. Then this is another shot of the Thornton Station site. I think this was the southbound train the next day. Then this is the Woodstock Station site. Yeah, crossing the two access roads, and then I believe the station would have been in the foreground there on the right. Then this is taken from the train. From my son and I took a ride on the Hobo a few years ago, and I believe these were the granite blocks for the platform for, I think it was the Fairview station, the first one south of Lincoln. So it's kind of cool riding by. I mean, that station has probably been gone for many, many decades, but obviously there are a few pieces of it that will always remain because I don't see anyone in the near future coming in to remove those. And finally, we're up in Lincoln. This is the Hobo Railroad heading out of Lincoln Depot, a little heading south for some foliage viewing. You have Rogers Ski and Sport over there. Looks like there's ski sales in full swing because the White Mountains will be white pretty soon after I took this. Then this was in winter of 2011. Friends and I took a ski trip up to Loon and said I was going out to get coffee on the Sunday morning, but also meant I was going out to photograph what I could in the snow. So I just got some of the old RDCs. One of them's in MBTA paint. The other's in the old B&M scheme. So yeah, this was on the access road to the recycling plant with Mount Potash, I think that is in the background, looming pretty prominently. Then a few years ago, my wife and I went up to the Woodstock area to celebrate our wedding anniversary. We played a round of mini golf, and the train interrupted us at one point, but that was fine by me. I think I was losing the game anyway, so it was good to have the distraction. Yep, so here's the hobo heading through Hobo Hills, Hobo Junction Golf. For
Roger Williams on the right.
yeah, and I think those are gone now, right? They were moved out of there, I believe. So then finally, we're at the tip of the branch at Hobo Junction. So this is the current day terminus of the Lincoln branch, and yep, the home of the Santa trains and all the foliage and tourist runs. Then, but as many of you know, the rails did continue much deeper into the Pemi wilderness. We're not going to go that deep today, but I'm just going to give you a little taste of it. Here's East Branch and Lincoln locomotive preserved in front of Loon Mountain. And then my last stop before we head back down to Plymouth, if you hike into the Lincoln Woods, many sections, the railroad ties from the logging operations still remain. Very popular hiking trail these days, and you know, you walk for a lot of miles and you'll see remains of these logging railroads. And if you ever seen a map of the extent of these logging railroads in the woods, it was pretty impressive. I mean, they infiltrated some of the most remote corners of this pretty vast wilderness that even today is you know, pretty formidable. You definitely want to know where you're going if you're walking in this way. And finally, just to give you a context of the terrain, this was from the summit of Mount Osceola, which is slightly to the south of where the last picture was taken. This was from a hike I did back in, I think this one's from 2017, I believe. But as you can see, it's a very, very wild, remote area. So once you're off the main road, it doesn't take you long before you're pretty deep into the wilderness up this way. So.
Spaceship is named the Flying Arrow.
So then we're heading back down to Plymouth here. So this is heading up towards Woodsville now. You can see the Lincoln Branch Bridge and the Route 3 bridge in the background there. The old configuration of Route 3 crossed under the line to Woodsville. And then this photo here is 1949, David K. Johnson, southbound Alouette on a Sunday afternoon. So just heading back into Plymouth. You can kind of make out a semaphore on the left side, the right side of the photo there. And that will come into play in a moment here. So this was the most of that embankment in that previous shot that I was able to find. And even that, I'm not even quite sure I was totally in the right place, but yeah, it very likely may not have been, but from looking at the current configuration today, this was the closest I could find.
Could you go back, Andrew, one more?
Sure.
What locomotive is that?
That's gotta be an E7, but boy, it looks foreshortened in that picture, doesn't it? Everything looks foreshortened, it's gotta be the lens on the camera.
All right, thank you.
Of course. All right, next one up, we got a local freight. This is from the archives of the Boston Maine Railroad Historical Society. This was local freight crossing Route 3 just north of the junction. I would guess early 50s, just due to the not much revenue on that train, and it's probably getting fairly close to the time of abandonment.
Yeah, I think this is 54, and it's right at the end.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so this was, right at the end. One of the things that's always fascinated me about this segment between Plymouth and Woodsville is that it served a very, very remote area. Some of the towns, Rumney, Warren, Wentworth, these were towns that even, they didn't have the industry that they had on the Pemi. They were very, very lightly populated, very sort of remote parts of the state. You didn't, even in when I was growing up as a kid, I knew all about Lincoln, Woodstock, Campton, but the Ski 93 campaign didn't include some of these towns. So, it was almost kind of just a very sort of wild, remote part of the state of New Hampshire. And I think that's kind of what attracted me to this line, just wondering why it was kind of serving such a isolated area.
It was built
You're just going through that area.
Exactly, yeah, not much So this right here is the most concrete piece of evidence I've found around that junction area. This is the semaphore base for the, you can kind of see it in the background on the right there next to the caboose is the semaphore just north of the junction. And this is the base of it that still exists if you park in that little community garden along Route 3 and hike up the embankment there. You will come across this. So yeah, so there are a few remnants up there, but again, a lot of stuff is very hard to find. So then we'll head up beyond Plymouth up into Quincy, which is part of Rumney. Very long tangent track, about 6 miles long between Plymouth and Rumney. So I'd often imagine like waiting on this platform or at this little flag stop at night, seeing a headlight coming down the tracks maybe 3 miles away from either side must have been kind of cool. And you can kind of make out a semaphore there in the background on the right.
The vehicle to the right of the station looks like the old.
Yeah, I would guess this is probably like early 1930s maybe. Again, another one, photographer's unknown, but kind of a, you know, it's still a pretty rural location today, but even, yeah, back then.
It's a lot of platform for a very small station.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point. I didn't even notice that. That is a huge platform for a...
There's no
May I share a
express.
point? The semaphores from Plymouth to North Haverhill or Blackmount were retired in 1933. So that there is a semaphore standing does point to the early 30s for the time frame of this picture.
And again, I do wonder, Brian Dame, not to put you on the spot again, but I'd love to know if the base of that semaphore still exists.
Couldn't say.
Are the
I'll have
blades
to get
on
up
there?
there.
Okay, well, maybe that might be a future Andrew's Excursions article, so stay tuned for that.
Come on up.
And here's a current day view of what the same location. Yep, pretty different today, although it is still used as a snowmobile corridor in the winter. And the high tension power line sort of distinguish the right of way, so it is traceable. Then this is the front step of that old Quincy flag stop. So not every piece of it got erased, and I'm guessing that probably weighs quite a bit. So I'm sure it's going to be there for quite some time. So now we head up to Rumney. This was from October of 1953 by the Boston and Maine Railroad. I do wonder if the B&M at that time, they were well aware that they wanted to abandon this section. So I'm wondering if maybe they did go around documenting some of the parts of the line before they abandoned it, because quite a few photos between Plymouth and Woodsville I found are Boston and Maine Railroad photos.
Well, they spent about 5 years they began about 1949 or 50 saying there's no business on this line, we want to get rid of it. They had petitions to the ICC several years before they actually got permission. And these might very well have been photos as part of the submissions to the ICC.
Oh, okay. That actually, Carl, that would make sense, because as I was finding some of these, I was thinking, why would the B&M be taking photos of a line that they're planning to abandon? But that could be a very good explanation to that.
If they fail in the first one or two tries, then I would think that would be very logical, because what they want to describe is they want to depict how rural it is.
Right, and I mean, you can see it's you know, the road to the station's not paved. There's only one vehicle in the image. You can tell Rumney's a pretty rural town, so I could definitely see that. So one of the remains of Rumney Depot you can find, the old station sign is mounted on the firehouse. That's right off of Route 25. So yeah, that was, I never knew that was there. Ben English Jr. alerted me to the presence of that, so it's pretty cool to see it up there. I've heard conflicting reports as to whether the actual depot or parts of the depot still exist. One lead told me it still stands in the Public Works yard. I'm not sure if it's the same building. I've been trying to figure that out over the years. But one thing I can tell you, the view from Mount Stinson, closest to Plymouth and Rumney, is gorgeous. That's the Baker River Valley from the summit of Stinson, looking over the area that the White Mountains Division served. This was taken back in December of 2011. Then this is an old postcard that I found online. This would have been just north of Rumney Depot, crossing Halls Brook. And Halls Brook, I believe, is a tributary out of Newfound Lake. And you would have crossed this magnificent stone arch, which unfortunately today is long gone because after the railroad was abandoned, they did major highway improvements on Route 25 that between Rumney and West Rumney utilized the right-of-way. So that's what you would have ridden over in the old days. Then this is another archives photo, 1954, not far, September 30th, 1954, which was about a month to the day before abandonment and heading through West Rumney. As you can see, not much revenue on that train because you can see the caboose at the far right there.
Love those BL2s.
Yep. And I present you the right-of-way today. Yep, so and an interesting thing to note in this image, you can kind of see the grade on Route 25. Once you got to Rumney, the line started climbing up into the hills, the ultimate goal being Oliverian Notch. And even on the current Route 25 highway, you can kind of make out how the elevation is starting to increase as you're driving along. Whereas the tangent in the Baker River Valley there was very little elevation on that part of the line because it was in the river valley. Swainborough, West Rumney Depot. They changed the name at some point to alleviate any confusion with Rumney and West Rumney. The shot's probably from the turn of the century, photographer unknown. And to my knowledge, that's about the only evidence of the railroad in that area is that crossbuck sign. I'm not even sure if that's an original relic or if somebody built that in later years, but yeah, you'd be hard-pressed to find much evidence of the railroad in West Rumney. There is a street called Railroad Track Road that follows the right-of-way, but most recently, I do believe it got washed out at some point. There's a sign before you enter it now, so yeah, not quite sure what the status is with that. Next up on the line is Wentworth, New Hampshire, another very rural town. This photo here is this is another B&M photo, I believe, and it's, I would guess probably not too far from abandonment, maybe late 1940s if I were to estimate. And again, you can tell the pretty rural nature of Wentworth. And then,
Interject.
of course.
There were some pictures that John Allen Roderick came up with and he shared with myself and others. One showed an unknown, unmarked location after a flood, and there was trackage, lumber stacks of lumber, and a turntable washed out. And it took a while, but I finally figured out that it was taken from the roof, maybe, of this station. And in 27, I think it was, the Baker River flooded over, and instead of flowing down to the left of the station, this picture, it actually came up and over the track and down the right-of-way. And what was really confusing was a turntable at Wentworth. And I went into Bill Ricca one day and went to the linens, the valve sheets, and on the linen I could just barely make out not only a turntable, but also a single stall engine house, which would be roughly where the photographer was standing, engine house or turntable. And my guess, I'm welcome to any other insight, but my guess is that that was a helper location in the early years. Rather than base a helper out of Plymouth, they based it out of Wentworth.
Yeah, and given the elevation gain on the line at this point, that would definitely make sense. So then this is Wentworth today, very nicely restored. The depot, I've seen some photos of the 1990s. The depot was in very, very rough shape. It was on the property of the lumber yard nearby, and the town moved it down closer to Route 25, and it's now the Historical Society. So really, really beautiful restoration, and Yeah, definitely one of my favorite stations in the state. So next up we have Warren, heading further up into the mountains. This is another Boston and Maine shot from October of 1953. Yeah, quiet day there from the looks of it. Then this is how it appears today. It's our regional medical office, and it's pretty distinguishable. Obviously, the long overhangs of the platform roof have been taken down, but for the most part, the structure seems fairly well intact.
And was the previous photograph another railroad photograph?
Yes, this was another Boston and Maine photograph from 1953.
Looks like a bus. In
Looks like the train order thing is still there in the original, now.
So then as we continue up to towards Haverhill, there's a milepost alongside Route 25 and at the base of somebody's driveway, which from the research I've done into mileposts, this actually wasn't too uncommon after a line got abandoned. Oftentimes mileposts would be quote unquote collected from along the right of way, and you could often then find them in people's yards or driveways. And so I can imagine it was probably pretty heavy to move that thing though.
I think the estimate on those off of B&M sheet was 500 pounds.
What's G?
Groveton, yeah, back in the, 73 miles. And actually, this is roughly, I believe, the halfway point too, from between Concord and Groveton. I think they're both around 73, 74 miles at this point, so. Then heading up into Oliverian Notch, the summit of the hill climb. This is what the rock cut looks like today. It's currently a ATV bike trail, so it's very distinguishable. Pretty impressive rock cut too. It's you're inside it. It's pretty deep and dark. I've hiked it a few times, and it's definitely one of the more interesting cuts I've explored over the years. Then finally, Glencliff Depot at the summit. Very, very, very rural location, even to this day. This is a B&M photo from 1953 again, not far from abandonment. And you can see the village there in the background. Of course, nowadays, none of this is recognizable. The depot's been long, long gone. Then I love this shot. This is from the B&M archives. I believe it has a title called The Last Commuter. It's going to be that guy's got a bit of a weight, seeing as the iron's been lifted. But this is from 1955. So the railroad removed the rails fairly quickly. Not sure how long it was before the ties got removed as well.
It's just reminiscing, that's all.
Would this be a railroad photograph?
This came from our archives. This might be part of the Dwight Smith collection. Yeah, I'm not, because at the time, if the line was formerly abandoned, I'm not sure if the railroad itself would have, but possibly. Maybe if they were looking to sell the building or part of the property or something. But yeah, to the best of my knowledge, this was from the Dwight Smith collection through our archives.
I can see Dwight taking that.
So I present you Glencliff today. Yep. So.
Posed with a photograph? Carl?
Somebody with him or whatever, I don't know if that's Dwight. I don't know what he looked like at that point in time, but I could see a kind of a wistful type photograph.
You can ask Rick, he's the one that scanned it.
Huh?
Go back a picture.
Rick, so I think this is a Dwight Smith collection photo. There's a question asked if that possibly could be Dwight himself posing, but
I don't know. You could ask him.
So Glencliff today, fun fact, the day I hiked in to take this photo, the gentleman waiting for the train was still waiting for it when I took this shot. Nah, just kidding, he wasn't actually there, but maybe. But so this is the cellar hole of Glencliff. You can see the stonework in the background there. Yeah, again, not much to see. So then the closest peak to Glencliff is Mount Moosilauke, which this is a shot from 2017, I believe. That's looking over towards Vermont, the farmland on the far side there. And just a beautiful hike. It's a 4,000 footer, but it's not too intense, and the views from the top are just fantastic. So I, again, just wanted to include this as sort of the mountain reference as to where we are. So back on the railroad, the next stop up would be Oliverian, another unknown photographer, but this photo I've seen quite frequently over the years. Again, probably like 1920s, 30s from the looks of things, the automobile in the background. So Oliverian, aka East Haverhill, small station for a small village there. But funny enough, the station does still stand today. It's been moved up the road a few miles to the little village of Pike, where it now serves as the library.
The previous photo was taken by Carlton Parker.
Carlton
You
Parker.
can tell from the distinctive lettering.
Oh,
This
okay,
is
yeah, the
style.
hand. Yeah, okay. Well, that's great to know. Yeah, because I've seen this photo a lot over the years, and I've always loved the gentleman, the worker there strolling in the foreground. You got presumably the conductor maybe back there about to cross the tracks. So then, speaking of the village of Pike, this is another B&M photo from 1953. The end is pretty near. Beautiful old early 50s Buick there parked by the station. 49, okay. Yep, beautiful, and Pike Depot. You can see the line emerging from the crossing there, or crossing under the road there, which this has all been reconfigured today. However, the station does still stand and pretty much looks as it did back then. The only thing that's been missing, unfortunately, the station sign, the Pike sign, that existed, I believe, up until like the late 90s or something along those lines, but subsequent visits I've done to Pike, I've never been able to see it, so not sure if it got brought inside the building or maybe a local resident nearby purchased it or something along those lines. But yeah, the roof, very, very interesting building, especially given the small size of the village. I know there used to be more there back in the day. There was a whetstone mill right across the street, I believe. So, business must have been fairly substantial at a time for a building this size. So then moving along, our next stop up is Haverhill. Yep, this is another B&M photo from 1953. I love the fog in this photo. It gives it a really ominous effect. And then up next is November 2010 when I stopped by Haverhill. So somebody's home now, and the right-of-way would have been right where that red garage is in the background. And the building hasn't actually changed too much. It's still pretty recognizable. And then heading up to Blackmount now. This is what it looks like today, or at least I believe this was 2012 that I snapped this photo. Yeah, the trees kind of got in the way there, but it was hard to get a pretty good angle of it. And then a little north of Blackmount, this is a B&M photo. I believe this was right after the Plymouth section got abandoned because they erected that little shed right there because the tracks in front of the depot in my previous picture had been abandoned at the time, but there was still service to Blackmount to serve the First National Grocery Warehouse. So I believe the B&M erected that structure there just to kind of serve as a little outpost for the freight crews. So this would have been after 1954.
There was a Blackmount and Haverhill tourist railroad that lasted for a few years. So that could have been part of that.
Oh, okay, that would make sense as well, yeah.
About 62.
Okay, because I think this photo I definitely believe is from the mid-1950s. But yeah, I wonder, I could see the tourist railroad using that structure. And then, so this building, this is looking south from that location a few years ago. That would have been the former First National Warehouse right there, one of the final customers of the Blackmount line. And that's the right-of-way straight ahead there, heading south towards Plymouth. And then this is another shot from our archives. Again, Woodsville used to be a pretty busy railroad location back in the day. There's the pretty large engine house, yard facilities there. At one point, it probably employed a lot of people in this small town. So just, and this was in its later years, as you can see, things are getting pretty forlorn. But yeah, still a few people working there, as you can see by the vehicles.
Andrew, which direction was the service to Blackmount?
I believe it would have come in from the north, so from Woodsville, Wells River. That it probably would have operated out of maybe White River Junction. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong.
It might have been a side trip of the local freight.
So then this is the, we've all seen these famous wood chip hopper cars with the modified sides. These pretty prominent up in the North Country in the 1960s. Again, another photographer on this one's unknown, but this is the Woodsville facility, and I always loved how the cars on the side said "Return to Woodsville." You know, just like the little thing on your library card says, "Hey, if found, return to blah blah." I guess the same can be applied for a multi-ton freight car as well.
I think they used to fill those around Ashland, didn't they?
I think, yeah, there were the plants down in the Ashland area that would have.
They used to come into Concord, then head north.
Okay. Then this is the Woodsville Freight House. This is taken fall of 2019. Right of way looking towards the White Mountain Transfer and towards Littleton is right there in the foreground. Then this is a shot at Woodsville, one of the final passenger trains heading south to Plymouth. And let me see, photographer on this one is, oh, actually unknown photographer, but date is October 24th, 1954, about a week before service to Plymouth was just a memory.
You know what's interesting about the Woodsville station is the northbound Alouette and the northbound Flyer, the White Mountain Flyer, would go through the station in opposite directions. Not too many stations in the United States that happen.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Okay, so this is what Woodsville looks like as of the summer of 2021. Yeah, my wife and I were driving through one day after being in the Lincoln Woodstock area, and we made a quick stop here. Although I think she told me the other night that she stayed in the car while I got out, which sounds about right. So, so I got out and took a few pictures. The station, you know, it's not what it used to be, obviously, but you know, it still kind of retains some of its elegance. Signals lying on the ground as well, too. You know, it used to be a much busier location back in its heyday, and not really nothing going on there today, which is a testament to this image here. The Opera House you can see in the background there. So the one shot of our trip that's taken in Vermont, this is the site of the former Wells River Station. This was a charter train from spring of 2019. A group of Dartmouth College alums, I believe, chartered this run between White River Junction and Wells River. So the station stood here till the 1970s, I believe, when it was burned down, victim of fire. But and back in the old days, the Around the Mountains trains would have crossed over from Woodsville, turned on the Y, come back into Woodsville to then head up to Littleton, Whitefield, that area. So this is our one. So this is technically a multi-state trip for a few hundred feet. So
I don't think that Around the Mountains, I may be wrong, but I don't think Around the Mountains went by that station. I think it just, well, yeah, they came, well.
I would have thought they'd go up the White Mountain Transfer, right,
Yeah.
like the freight train would go up to Burlington.
But there's also the possibility that then I'd have to look at which year, that they simply went up the north, they went up the northern and then up over and around. That was after 1954, though. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I better keep my mouth shut.
Now, hey, again, I want this to be interactive. So, you know, these obviously, like a lot of information that I don't necessarily know. You know, I've always just loved the locations and the stations and everything. So anyone who has any further information than what I'm providing, feel free to, you know, speak right up. Next one up here, this is from the Richard Sanborn collection, Bath, New Hampshire. Small town heading towards Littleton on Route 302. And this is probably early 1950s, I'd guess, from the automobile in the background poking out from behind the station. Another Dane Malcolm shot of a freight train approach in the Bath area. Not sure exactly where this is in relation to the building, but just one of Dane's fantastic winter scenes. Then what the site looks like currently today, you got the rail trail, the restored B&M caboose, and the home. I believe it's on the property of that house in the background there.
May I comment? The house is owned by Tom Salmon, who is a UNH engineering graduate, and he worked in the New York City subway system. That caboose is the same that sat at Madbury while he was going to college. His father was was either a section foreman or a track supervisor, and they set him up with a caboose and a sidetrack to park it on for 4 years, and so he didn't get corrupted in the dormitories. And when he was done, he moved it, again by rail, up to Bath, had it spotted. He built that, would you call that a salt box?
I would, you know.
Yeah.
That's a salt box.
That is modeled after the freight house at Rockingham Junction.
Okay, yeah, I always thought that over the years, and that's fascinating to find out, so that's been confirmed. Yeah, that it does look exactly like what that freight house looked like.
Tom Salmon worked as a townman in Winchester Tower, the Boston Division for a while before he went to the Army.
Okay, so and like I said, one of probably the most prominent attraction in Bath is the covered bridge, which is also the current home to the depot sign, as you can see on top of the. So just for reference, it's cheaper to walk fast across this bridge than it is to walk fast across the Blair Bridge. Fine up here, I guess Bath doesn't need quite as much revenue. The fine here is only $1.
Does that roof leak?
You know, I would not know. That's a great question.
We can take a bath, I guess.
This is the bridge that Jim Shaughnessy photographed, the B&M unit.
Right, yeah, that's a beautiful photo, yeah. Okay, so next up the line, we stop in Lisbon. This is from our archives. Yep, 1950s. You have some beautiful old automobiles on the left there, and local, looks like a decent-sized local freight coming through, and just a beautiful, beautiful building. And the great news is that it still stands today. No tracks anymore, but again, Roger Robar, who took the lead on preserving and restoring this beautiful building, it's definitely his the legacy that he's left is this beautiful North Country depot. And I mean,
Passed away within the last year.
yeah, I heard that. But what at least his memory will always be served by this beautiful station.
It's hard to believe what it looked like when he took over trying to do something with it. They'd knocked one end out, put a commercial roll-up door in there with parking dump trucks inside. It's got the
Yeah, I've seen photos.
On the inside, Roger either built or oversaw it being manufactured and installed.
Yeah, I've seen photos from the 1970s, and it wasn't pretty. I mean, if you would have told someone back in the 1970s it would look like this today, they probably never would have believed you. But just goes to show where there's a will, there's a way. And I mean, Roger did a heck of a job on this, and we should all, really just a magnificent, magnificent piece of North Country railroading preserved. And this was just an old sign. This was taken in 2019, an old sign by the right-of-way. Guessing it dates back to the Boston Maine Railroad era. So kind of cool to see that still exists there if you look for it. Historic shot of Littleton, mid-1950s on this shot. Unknown photographer, but you can see the passenger traffic, a little freight traffic. It's a pretty busy place back in those days. Then another shot from our archives, passenger train approaching Littleton, Bethlehem. Then fun fact, who knew the MBTA commuter rail ran to Littleton, New Hampshire?
1 day only.
So this is one of David Poor's images, which I'm very grateful I was able to include, because this is just something you would just never believe would have ever happened. But Yeah, I believe this was back in 1982. One-day excursion, or two-day excursion, I think, up to Berlin. Yep, up to Berlin and back. And I mean, what amazes me about this is that I ride the commuter rail twice a week from Wyoming Hill to North Station, and I could not imagine riding an MBTA commuter rail coach all the way to Littleton, New Hampshire. I mean, that takes a level of dedication. I mean, I can tell you there are some days that even that 15-minute ride can seem like a long time. But
I'm sure some of the old wooden coaches from before that will probably know better.
very true, actually. Very good point.
These were new Pullman standard coaches. They were not more than a year or two old.
Yeah, the cheapest.
Well, that's true.
They're made for short commutes.
So then
They smell better.
Littleton as it appears today, taken in late fall of 2019. Quick stop over to Maplewood, which is, unfortunately, the station no longer stands, but
What is it, that thing?
I couldn't do an Around the Mountains tour without showing a shot of Maplewood, so this was my photo from 2019.
Yeah, I remember that.
Okay, so then we're up to Whitefield Junction right now. This is a historic shot from early 20th century from the Dave Poor collection. So you can see, the area is pretty well clean cut back then. A lot of, not a lot of foliage cover at that time.
That's back lumber. Is that
Yeah, it's either lumber or, as a gentleman said back there, possibly railroad ties. And then approximately the same location today, looking in a different direction. This shot's looking towards Whitefield. That last shot was looking back towards Littleton. But where all that foliage growth is would have been like where the actual junction was back in the day. So this was my shot from 2011. Then we were even able to hike into the woods a bit and find remnants of, these were old, I guess, sort of almost like inspection pits, kind of. You can sort of see like the recesses in the terrain right there and further in the background. And off in the upper corner there, that's Ben English Jr., who accompanied me on that hike and showed me a lot of this fascinating history that's really long lost in the woods. Case in point, milepost we found, Berlin, New Hampshire, 30 miles. Yep, in pretty good shape too, given I'm sure that has not been given a fresh coat of paint in many decades. Stone Arch Bridge we found between Littleton and Whitefield, just outside of Whitefield actually. 1892 is etched on the keystone, a little hard to see, but took us a while to find where it was, but once we did, we made our way down, and it was worth the descent. It was really, really cool to see that up close, and you'd walk right over it and you'd never know it was down there, so that was definitely one of the highlights of that trip. Another Dane Malcolm shot from July of 1966, approaching the ball signal, Maine Central train out. Then a David Poor shot, I'm guessing, not sure the exact date on this one, probably late 70s, early 80s from the look of it. Bicentennial paint job on one of the locomotives. The Junction as it looked in 2017 when I stopped by one day. I remember standing in this location thinking, gee, will I ever get to see a train in this location again in my lifetime? They had just run that special to Whitefield in 2017, and at the time it wasn't known if they would do another one, but I got very, very lucky with what was to happen next. This was in 2018, the Red Ball Special. Yes, we will get to the depot momentarily. Yep, the train ran all the way up to the Route 3 crossing. It stopped there, then back down to North Conway. Attracted a huge crowd, rail fans and non-rail fans, which was pretty cool. Everyone, a lot of locals from the town just came out to see the train, and it was just cool to see all people from all different areas just enjoying a very unique sight in the North Country. One of my favorite shots of it, pointing south towards North Conway and the ball signal in the background. Okay, so I love this shot for many, many reasons. As many of you know, I love my Dunkin' Donuts iced coffee. I love my B&M Railroad station, and that's also my beloved Subaru Impreza in the foreground there. So that was, I took that the day of the Red Ball Special. I stopped after I did the train. You know, it was going to be a long drive home to Melrose, so I needed another iced coffee. So I was like, hey, you know, Dunkin' Donuts in a former railroad station, what's not to love? So that's the former Whitefield B&M passenger depot. So very, very nicely repurposed, in my opinion.
There's a laundromat, I think.
Yeah, I think it's served a few uses over the years, but yeah, again, that one gets my seal of approval for sure. Okay, so now we're heading over to Wambeck Junction. This is another photo from our archives, mid-1950s. You can see the presidential range in the background there, I believe, and pretty, very remote location, but back in the old days, you know, it did get quite a bit of train traffic. Today, unfortunately, not as much. This is my shot from 2011. You can see like the B&M rails have been removed and on the left side there, and occasional service still on the tracks on the right, but very, very infrequent at that time. And then this is headed on the line to Berlin, just out of Wambeck Junction. Just a beautiful shot. I mean, that must have been a magnificent ride back in the day, and old telegraph pole still stands there on the right side. One of the funny notes from that hike, that was another hike I did with Ben English Jr., and at one point he pointed out an apple tree by the side of the right-of-way to me and said, 50 years ago, some engineer was probably eating an apple as they were doing their run, threw the core out the window. So interesting to see things come full circle. Old switch stand in the Wambeck Junction area that we found that day as well. This, I believe, is the Jefferson Depot. This is now in somebody's yard. They use it as a garage. Yeah, it's in kind of rough shape, but the structure still stands, so that's good enough for me, because a lot of these structures have not been so fortunate. This is an old historic photo of a Highlands Depot heading on the line to Berlin. Let's see, Richard Sanborn collection. 1930s to 40s, I'd guess, by just the feeling of the image. And this is Highlands as it appeared in 2011. Couldn't really get a great shot of it. It's somebody's house now, so that was taken from the road. Then this is from our archives, and I also believe is a Richard Story photo. If anyone has Robert Willoughby Jones's 3 Colorful Decades, this shot is featured in one of the chapters. And as a young boy getting that book, this shot always fascinated me. I've always, to this day, it is one of my favorite shots and so iconic of railroading in New Hampshire's North Country. I mean, you can just see like the immensity of the mountains just towering over the freight train is pretty remarkable in my opinion, and just one of my all-time favorite North Country shots.
Once upon a time, the Boston and Maine was on top of that mountain too.
Yep, that is. Okay, so up next, this was the Appalachia Station site. This is also from our B&M Historical Society archives. At the time, I don't think an actual like station building ever stood here. It was always kind of like a flag shelter, but by this time it had been torn down and pretty much just the sign remained.
Is it possible that's another company photograph?
That's a good question, Dave. I'm not 100% certain.
No year given?
No, this was another one from our archives. Yeah, Rick, I didn't notice a year on this one. I'm not sure if you might have any further information.
This one I sent to you?
Yeah, this is one of the ones you sent to me.
Oh, boy. Maybe in the 50s?
Yeah, I would guess probably like 1950s, but then this was in 2011. This is the Box Pony Truss on that line headed to Berlin. Then finally we get to the impressive trestle in Gorham. This is also from our archives. No exact year was given, but my guess would be 1970s, just based off of the advertisements, the locomotive. Definitely feels like it would probably be mid to late 70s. And of course you have the mountains in the background, and the immensity of the trestle is really apparent here.
You got many bluebirds up there until you got at least the 200s in, if not the 300s.
Yep, so then we have the current, the trestle as it currently appears, or at least back in 2011. Now the rail trail runs over it, but still a pretty dominant structure in that area. Then a quick side trip over to the Grand Trunk Depot in Gorham. This one also looks identical to the Yarmouth, Maine depot. Pretty unique style on their buildings, and always been a favorite of mine.
I got some pictures of 6218 steam locomotive coming through there on an excursion.
Oh, nice,
back in the
nice.
60s.
Okay, yeah, I've seen a photo or two of that. That's great. Yep, and of course 4265 parked there. Yeah. So then Sam Vaughn Jr. photo. I believe this was the last passenger train out of Berlin from what I've seen on the internet about this shot. So you can, the funny thing is the depot is already being used as a laundromat. There's a gentleman in the foreground there with his laundry basket who doesn't seem to care too much about the train's presence. So I feel like that's kind of, at the time, that's kind of iconic how people in Berlin felt about losing rail service. So,
And actually right now, a brief little bit about that. I think right now it currently sits with no one in it right now, because for a while it served as the Eastern Depot, as a restaurant, but that actually moved to an old Shell gas station, just below where the Walmart is now.
Yeah.
So right now no one's actually in there, I believe, so it's just kind of sitting there.
A couple of years ago, this might have been before COVID, somebody reached out to us, they were going to buy it and turn it into a Boston and Maine themed brewery.
yeah, God, I would have been up there right now. So this was 2011 Berlin. You can see the commercial. The commercial exhaust from the laundromat still exists there, and and I think at the time it was being used as that restaurant. So it's a pretty nice building. It'd be nice if eventually somebody could maybe buy it and sort of repurpose it and restore it a little, because it definitely seems to have like the basic elements that it needs to be something pretty cool for that area. Okay, so the most recent peak, or the closest peak that I've hiked to this area is Mount Pierce. So this is a view of Mount Washington from Mount Pierce. You can see the weather tower and stuff on top of Mount Washington and the presidential range. That was another really fun hike I did back in 2015, I believe it was. So now we're heading over on Maine Central rails to conclude things. We're going to head down through the Notch, and first we'll make a stop in Hazens, 101 miles from Portland. Steam excursion with 7470 approaching the location back in 2019, I believe it was, that they ran this. Now here's a shot of it on the other side of the road from Hazens. I believe that's Cherry Mountain in the background there. Yeah, pretty cool shot, and beautiful weather that day too. That was a fun chase. Then here's a shot of a small freight train at Hazens. I took that back in 2011. Again, I believe Cherry Mountain in the background there stands pretty prominently. So again, this is part of the presentation where a lot of the trains are heading in the opposite direction as we're traveling. So just bear with me as we head south, but most of the trains we're going to see will be heading north. So we're heading back down through Twin Mountain. This is the Route 3 crossing of the Maine Central and Twin Mountain. Here's the excursion train heading north. Then Conway Scenic Mountaineer trains are going to sort of be the focus for the rest of the presentation as we head south from Fabian.
That's great.
Yep, and I like this one too, just getting the two different, you have the COG sign and then you have the Maine Central heritage paint job on the Conway Scenic. So. So now we're heading south from Bretton Woods Fabian, crossing Route 302. Yeah, along these scenic trains are very, very popular in peak foliage, so they always carry a lot of cars behind them, and they're all full. Heading past the Bretton Woods section house, Route 302 is there in the background. I couldn't not include a shot of the Mount Washington. I mean, that's by far probably one of the most beautiful buildings in that whole region, and I feel like even on days with lousy weather, it's hard to get a bad shot of it, so it's always been a favorite of mine. Then this shot here is taken from the summit of Mount Willard. You can see 302 to the left there, the railroad to the right. This was taken May 24th, 2015, and I know that exact date because this was the hike at the summit I proposed to my now wife at the top of, so that was a very, very, very memorable day for both of us, and yeah, I couldn't, I was trying to think of one of the best locations I could to do it, and this image here of Crawford Notch is always just probably one of my most favorite images of anywhere I've traveled on the planet. So, yeah, it seemed like the right area to do it.
Can you go back to the Mount Washington Hotel? I'll ask this forum because probably people here know. Did the B&M have a branch that went to the Mount Washington Hotel
Yes.
at one point?
Well, to the Cod Railway.
Oh, because if you play on their golf course, there's a sign that says, you know, the B&M trail is part of the cart path on the golf.
That was the right of way.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that was the right of way up to the base station.
There was also a spur from the branch up to base station that went in behind the hotel to what I believe was a coal-fired power plant or steam heating plant.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're moving south here through the Notch. This is Crawford Depot right here, as we all know. Very, probably one of the most iconic New England Railroad images there is. Very, very hard to mistake this location, and always a photographer's favorite over the years.
1911 rail up through there.
1911, wow.
Read the rails. 1911.
1911, wow. Then shot with a telephoto heading south through Crawford, or past the depot. Conway Scenic Work Train parked there on the left. Yeah, it was kind of a cool prop for that photo, I thought. Passing the Gateway Section House. Crawford's is in the background there. Now this one's heading north through the Gateway Cut there, one of the iconic features of the mountain divisions, the deep rock cut there. Then heading south from the Notch, it pretty much clings to the side of Mount Willard on those trestles, and you get a really nice view of it from 302. Yeah, and then just a general foliage shot of the Notch just kind of gives you an idea of how rugged the terrain is up there. Yeah, very impressive. They were able to build the... Oh, thank you. This was from summer of 2012. Ben English Jr. and I hiked up to the Mount Willard section house site, and we caught the Conway Scenic coming through up there. So that was... Then we headed a little further south and hiked to the Wiley House site, and you can see the hikers there waiting for the train to pass as they continue on their hike. Frankenstein Trestle, we hiked around the base of it, just really impressive structure to see it from the ground. There's a hiking trail that takes you up right through there, and you know, you see it from the road and stuff, but to really get up under the bridge really gives you a perspective of how enormous it is. Then this was looking over Frankenstein Trestle with Mount Washington in the background. Ben got permission from the Conway Scenic for us to hike up and check this area out, so that was cool to see that as well. Then this is Frankenstein Trestle as viewed from the Dry River Campground entrance. You can see the Conway Scenic inching its way across there through the foliage, and yeah, really cool place to get photos. Heading further south through Notchland. Notchland Inn is just out of sight behind the train passing through. And that road in the foreground, that used to be the old configuration of 302 until they rebuilt it probably in like the 1970s or so, I believe. Fourth Iron crossing heading north towards Crawford Notch. Bartlett heading south. Bartlett Freight House there on the left. Passenger depot's long gone. Another Bartlett shot. And third shot at Bartlett, just kind of a neat location. I've always loved that signal there on the left as well. Heading through Attitash, this is heading back north up to the Notch. Yeah, a little platform built there that passengers can board on. Then Glen and Jackson Depot heading down towards the North Conway area now.
It's a ski lodge now, isn't it?
Yeah, I believe a ski club owns the building, yeah.
About 10 years ago.
Yes, they do.
Then this is approaching Intervale. This is called the Intervale Straight Line. It's a long tangent track. That's Mount Washington you see in the background there. And if you look really carefully, you can see like the weather towers and everything. Then another shot at Intervale. This is heading north for the Notch. So another Dane Malcolm shot. This is North Conway, 1970. Things aren't looking good around there. Depot's boarded up. Yard is all overgrown. Not really much going on there. Still a little local business, but not much at that time. So that's 1970. Then I present to you 2014. Or actually, I'm sorry, 2012 I took this shot. So it's amazing comparatively how nice the property looks these days compared to how it used to look. Yep, and the 7470 on the turntable there. This was taken on July 30th, 2011. Yep. Street side shot of North Conway. Again, just arguably probably one of the most iconic northern or New England buildings of all time. I mean, you could probably show this picture to many people around the world and they'd know immediately where it's from.
You get any book on railroad stations, that picture's in it.
Oh, yeah, exactly. All right, we head down to Conway. A shout out to my buddy Brad, who's here, whose family has a house up in Conway. So I had to throw some Conway content in. Here's the freight house at the end of the Conway Scenic. Current operations all decked out for fall. Lake Kachora heading south. Yeah, no train in this, but this is one of my favorite photos. It was just late afternoon. Lake was like a sheet of glass. I just had to stop and take that. I've never hiked Chicora, but it's definitely on my hiking bucket list. And this is Madison, Silver Lake, New Hampshire, amidst some fall foliage. Streets are pavement side shot of Madison, I believe still being used as a post office. Then track side shot. Then this was back when the Silver Lake Railroad was running back in, took this shot in 2011, I believe. It was a pretty busy operation the day I stopped in there. Unfortunately, I got shut down, I believe, they shut it down a few years ago, I believe. I guess it just wasn't making the revenue. But this day, there were a lot of people there. It seemed like it was doing pretty well at that time. So, yeah.
It was never for revenue. It was always by donation.
Oh, okay.
2017.
Oh, okay, thanks. Okay, yeah. Then we continue our journey south into Ossipee. This is the former West Ossipee Depot. Canopies still exists but closed in. You can see Mount Whittier in the background, which used to be a ski resort.
The railroad calls it Mount Whittier.
Yep, and then Mount Whittier looking north. Freight house is in the background too. That's since been demolished. And the depot, hopefully something will be, I'm not quite sure if there's anything inside the depot at this point. I believe like a decade ago, the local Lions Club was using it, but I'm not quite sure what its status is at the present time, but it's a nice structure. So hopefully they can do something to it. Then, as I said a minute ago, there's one of the old one of the old gondola towers for the ski resort. Very interesting fact about that gondola is that it crossed right over Route 16. Yeah, and one of the Mount Whittier, I believe, shut down in the mid-1980s. The primary reason being they never had snowmaking. So just given their location, they were a smaller mountain, but not too far from many larger mountains that had better snowmaking. So unfortunately, Mount Whittier was always kind of at a disadvantage in that regard, and they just as some of those other mountains got bigger and bigger, Mount Whittier just couldn't compete, especially not having snowmaking available. That was a huge detriment.
They didn't have any water access.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's interesting to learn. So we're going to take a quick sidetrack to Wolfboro on our final leg here. Beautiful Wolfboro Depot. This was in the fall of 2012.
Sunrise beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a beautiful late afternoon shot. I think this was around like 5:30. Shot of the order board and the turret that same day. Another unmistakable railroad structure for.
When you ran the Wolfboro Rail, that was a nice ride from there over to Sandonville.
Yeah, and actually we're heading out on that right-of-way right now. We have the Wolfboro 1 mile post. Yep, rails still exist. Rail trail's been built between the rails, which is kind of cool. Kind of narrow, but you know, a neat concept though, so you can still retain the rails and also please people who want the footpath as well. Looking the other way, Sanbornville 11. Then looking up, Fernald is in the distance there, 9 miles from Sanbornville. Up close shot of Fernald, neat little depot building, which I believe that is one of the original signs on it as well.
That's still there, I believe, isn't it?
I think it is. I haven't driven by there in a while, but I'm pretty sure it's still there.
That building was built originally in Wolfboro to shelter the 25-tonner. And when they built the engine house at Fernald, they carefully took apart the temporary engine house and brought it out to where it would become that station.
So then for the final hiking shot of the presentation, this was taken at the summit of Mount Roberts, one of the mountains in the Ossipee Range. This is looking up towards the Whites and the Presidentials. Yeah, just a beautiful, even I did this hike after the foliage had expired, but it was still pretty impressive view nonetheless. So then finally, the final part of this is we, through the Cotton Valley Society, we did a track car event in Ossipee this past fall. We rode track speeders from center Ossipee down to just north of the Ossipee Depot where the rails end. And yeah, shout out to Jesse Mazzy for helping make this event possible. It was a really fun day and just a section of track that you just figure you're never really gonna get to explore. But that was a fun ride. So this is center Ossipee looking north. The cars are being staged, ready for the run south. Another shot there with everyone getting ready to board to go out on a run. We had some beautiful weather that day too, which also made it a nice experience. Just a shot of the center Ossipee Mountain View Station, which is now a restaurant. This is actually along the line. It's a little blurred because we were rolling down the tracks, and all the mileposts have been pretty nicely painted along there. 114 miles north of Boston.
Pretty good restaurant in the station.
Yeah, that's what I've heard of. Actually, I've never eaten there, but I have heard the food is good. Polly's Crossing, which is one of those locations I always kind of wanted to check out, and it was really cool to arrive by track car. Rode with Jesse that day, and he let me off for a second to take a photo, and I'm very grateful he didn't run off on me though, because it's a pretty isolated location here. So I was grateful that he stopped for a few seconds so I could take this shot. Then we're literally at the end of the line, as you can see here. The rails end. There's the track cars in the background, and a few hundred feet south is the old Ossipee Depot. And then a little further south of that is the end of current New Hampshire North Coast operations. So this we then walk down a few hundred feet to the old Ossipee Depot, and it does look like it's received some attention over the years, but I do wonder what the future holds for this building. It's feel like every time I see it, it looks like it could be a little closer to. Yeah, I feel like it's been for sale here and there over the years, and those chimneys definitely look more recent. So, yeah, so we're now sort of at the end here at Ossipee. This is where our Around the Mountains trip ends, but for anyone who was here for my prior presentation, I don't like to end things on a sad note, so I'll give us one more shot of the track car day. There's me and my son. Yep, there we are in the track car. We had a...
That's a nice job.
So I'll just real quickly conclude by saying, you know, there's still a lot to see of the old B&M. Don't let, you know, some sad older photos you've seen of abandonments or anything like that deter you from going out there and seeing what you can find. Because if there's one thing I've learned over my years of doing it, there's always something new to discover, something new to see. So just as I end my Andrew's Excursions articles, I'll end this by saying just keep exploring out there. And, you know, if anyone ever wants to reach out to me, correspond with anything you find, please feel free to contact me. It's always a pleasure learning as much as I can from all of you. So thank you all for coming. I appreciate it.
Nice job.
Oh, thank you.
Say that many